It was science here in the Taupo catchment that finally got farmers to truly understand the impact of their farming systems.
In this series, Reducing While Producing, we take you on a virtual farm tour to look at how the New Zealand agricultural sector is responding to the challenges of climate change and working to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by increasing on-farm efficiency and producing more sustainably. In this episode, we look at the opportunities for farmers to innovate and take a science-led approach to their individual and diverse climate challenges. Mike Barton has been farming in the Taupo district for 16 years. Prompted by science-led evidence, he and wife Sharon turned their focus to helping the district to benefit from a significant shift in their farming landscape. Lake Taupo is the largest freshwater lake in the Southern Hemisphere, and all of the farms around the lake are located in its water catchment area.
So back in 2000, the year 2000, scientists who had been studying the lake for at least the last 50 years realised that the levels of dissolved nitrogen in the water column and the levels of chlorophyll A generated by algae was just starting to slightly increase. So the problem we had to face was the manageable nitrogen coming from human activity in the catchment had to be reduced. So the process over the next 20 years was, how do we identify where that manageable nitrogen is coming from? How do we sheet responsibility home to the people that are producing that nitrogen? And then how do we manage their businesses and their farming systems in such a way that we limit that nitrogen, and in effect we had to reduce it by 20%. Yeah, the way we did this was to impose a nitrogen cap on every farming system in the catchment. So we were successful in negotiating that the 20% reduction would come from a fund that was generated by central government and regional authorities, and that fund was used to buy up farms or buy up nitrogen from farms and permanently take it out of the system. The solutions that we've had to impose, or that we've all agreed to impose upon ourselves in many ways, have led to significant reductions in greenhouse gases at the same time. So if we were to look at the total catchment greenhouse gas profile, it's significantly reduced. So the actual number of farms in the catchment started out when we began this process as 105 farms. It's now down to 72 farms. Farmers have learned how to farm, understanding the science, understanding the policy, and understanding the impact of their farming system. So in my view, they've become much more efficient. And because we have got science to teach us how to function more effectively, there's actually the opportunity to reduce our greenhouse gas footprint, because we have a good relationship with science now, and there's a 10 or 15 year relationship where we trust and understand each other.
Out of challenge comes opportunity. Science gave Taupo sheep and beef farmers, Ruby and Sean, the motivation and confidence to find new ways of farming their land with reduced impact on the local environment.
So when we were buying the farm, realising that we were looking at a property that was inside the Taupo catchment actually gave us a sense of security, understanding effectively how we had to operate within an existing nitrogen restriction area. We've always had a high expectation of how we wanted to farm, so it didn't feel that daunting, and knowing that we could model things through the use of overseer and analyse how our system would change compared to the previous system actually gave us a lot of
certainty over what we'd be able to do in the future. Obviously there's a lot of potential policy changes were sort of already on the horizon when we were looking to purchase the farm, but knowing that we were already coming into an area that already had its regulation in place was actually, it was actually a positive. And as Ruby alluded to, especially that we had the ability to use overseer ourselves and actually do the modelling, so we were comfortable with what we'd be able to farm.
I think it's feeling in control of the process. If you didn't have that ability to do any of the modelling and you were coming in really green, I think it would have been very daunting. And I guess we always knew that we would run sheep back on the property, and knowing from sort of our experience that reducing some of the cattle stock numbers and replacing them with sheep stock units, we were going to see a benefit immediately from a lower nitrogen footprint. I think because we've always had this keen interest in sheep dairy, probably for the last 5 or 6 years, that We saw the land, we came and walked, we put our hiking boots on before we purchased it and walked pretty much the whole parameter and got that really good feel for would the land suit what we want to do. We know farming in this area will still have some challenges, but I think we could just see that we could turn this into an even more productive entity without having a negative impact on the environment, and that's a really satisfying thought.
Sheep milk's a great product, and when you combine it with a quite favourable environmental footprint when compared to cow dairy, and still being able to get good lambs from the ewe and rear those and finish those as well. We just thought it was quite a sort of a unique food system.
Working alongside scientists has also provided Colin Hurst with significant gains on his farm, a 700-hectare mixed arable operation near Timaru.
Probably 30 years we've been working away. When I first started farming in the late 80s, we got involved in grass seed production, and 1,000 kilos per hectare was considered to be a really good yield. And we started, about that time, we started increasing our nitrogen inputs, and we cranked them up, but we didn't seem to be getting any higher yields. It was all about our timings of their nitrogen applications. So we were putting it on too early in the spring, and the plants were growing really growthy and they were falling flat. With the scientists from Ag Research, we soon worked away with the scientists and refined our techniques, and this is about applying small amounts of nitrogen in the spring, this early part of the spring, and increasing it through the season. So we've dramatically reduced our nitrogen applications, but our yields have gone up, and I'd suggest we've doubled our yields over a 30-year period, and reducing our nitrogen inputs from approximately 230 kilos of nitrogen down to 150. Of all my things I've been involved in my farming career, this is the most exciting thing I've been involved with, how we're producing more with less. It's kind of cool, really.
David Burkett runs a 180-hectare fully arable farm near Leaston. Soil science is what's making a difference and reducing nitrate runoff discharge on his farm. It's a different science-led approach to the same problem.
The focus there has been what can we do to improve both the structure and the quality of our soil, as well as the biology health in our soil as well. We know that soil is the key medium that we work in food production, and that top 6 inches of soil is what feeds everyone on the world. So it makes sense that that's what we should be focusing on for the next 20 to 30 years. With climate change, when you look at the modelling on the Canterbury Plains here on the east coast, we will see higher temperatures and probably drier conditions. We're really lucky here in Canterbury. We have a very good water supply with our irrigation, but that doesn't mean we can take it for granted. So increasing the efficiency of our irrigation systems and also increasing the water holding capacity of our soils. Now we can do that by improving the structure of our soil and the organic matter carbon content of our soil. So when we increase the carbon content in our soil, we increase the water holding capacity as well as the nutrient holding capacity. And they are going to be two things going forward in the future which are going to be crucial to our ability to continue to produce at the level we produce at now. What we've learned over the past 4 or 5 years is that the cover crops are up to 5 to 10 times faster at putting carbon into our soil than just returning the residue. Cover crops has been probably a light bulb moment for us, and integrating those cover crops into our annual rotations. We've seen some really great improvements in the soil structure, organic matter and quality of our soil because of those cover crops.
David's reduced the use of fertiliser and made his soils work even harder for him.
One of the things we've noticed is the water holding capacity of our soil has increased. We can measure that quite easily. When we do have natural rainfall events, we are able to store more of that and have less runoff. Obviously, even when we do have access to water, it comes at a cost. Irrigation water costs money for us to pump, all the infrastructure as well. So the more we can improve the water holding capacity of the soil, the more we can store water which nature is providing us naturally through rainfall. We know with the climate change modelling that we are probably going to see less natural rainfall. So our ability to capture and store as much of that as possible in our soil will be key going forward. When you improve your soil, if you can improve the organic matter component, you're also increasing the carbon in the soil. And both those things help us to store more nutrient in the ground. If we can store more nutrient in the ground, then we obviously don't need to put as much artificial inputs into our systems. And that artificial inputs, when we look at the greenhouse gas loss out of an arable system, Fertiliser is the largest greenhouse gas emitter in our system. And then the component, when it does convert in our soil, is also a gaseous loss as well. So if we can reduce those inputs by using good rotations and building our soil with things like cover crops, then we can actually stop the input, the levels of inputs we're putting in, which reduces the greenhouse gas, and also the level of conversion in our soil of those nutrients. It's a double win for the environment. But the key thing of it is that we need to be improving our soil and building that organic matter up in our soil. And at the same time, we're storing carbon in it as well. So to me, that's the fundamental big benefit of getting our soil right, is the ability to store more carbon and store more water and nutrients.
Highly adaptive and open to trying new techniques to see if they work outside the labs, New Zealand farmers are welcoming scientists and research teams onto the farm and working with them to innovate.
We do a lot of our research work on here for different organisations, from a range of things, from nutrients, plant breeding, entomology. So there's a raft of different scientists coming out onto the property. In a way, I guess you could say we're a little bit of a research hub farm at times, and I guess it's because I want to understand what's actually happening, what's driving things in our system. And at the end of the day, we need science to understand and unlock some of the mysteries that we're seeing. And there's a lot of things we still don't understand, particularly about the soil. The soil biome's a hugely complex piece of material, and we're only just starting to understand some of the complex relationships that happen between microbes and bacteria and fungi in that soil. So I think there's a raft of learning for us all to understand. And the more we can understand that, the more we can start to solve some of these problems of greenhouse gases and carbon.
Scientist David Whitehead has been involved in an on-farm research environmental project on New Zealand's South Island.
For the last 5 years, we've been working on a dairy farm at Ashley Dean, which is about 15 kilometres away from Lincoln here in the Selwyn catchment in Canterbury. The reason we chose that farm was because it's very, very characteristic of a large number of farms that have been converted from dryland, mainly sheep farming, to irrigated dairying in the last 20 years. They're very stony soils, they're very shallow soils, they're fragile soils. And so there is a need to be able to ensure that we reduce the emissions of greenhouse gases and nitrate leaching. And we're also working with the local iwi to help them protect the takitanga of the site, such that they can ensure that the quality of the water in the Selwyn catchment and Lake Waihora remains good quality.
David and the research team are discovering which crops are best at minimising nitrogen losses and when to plant them.
We are working with mixed cropping. If anything, we want plants that have different characteristics which will retain soil carbon but also reduce nitrogen losses. And those characteristics, for example, are deeper rooting, so there's more interactions deeper in the soil, nitrogen fixation, so that we can reduce the need for nitrogen inputs, winter active growth, that's really very important to maintain a cover crop throughout the winter time. And lastly, work on nitrification inhibitor, that's certain chemicals that are produced by plants or by the microbial communities in the soil, which can help hold on to that nitrogen and stop it being converted into the forms which move it to nitrous oxide production or nitrate leaching. We find that a mixture of species is much more beneficial than working with one single species, because we then cover all those different characteristics. One of the main findings is that ryegrass clover is not particularly suited to reducing nitrogen losses because it's not very active during the winter time. It grows very well during the summertime, but it does not help in the winter time. So the idea of growing a crop such as fodder beet, which is a common fodder crop grown by farmers, but then growing that with Italian ryegrass during the wintertime is the ideal benefit, because as soon as the fodder beet is eaten by the animals, the Italian ryegrass will come and it will soak up all of the nitrogen from the urine patches that the animals have deposited on the soil. That's one very good way of minimising nitrogen losses.
Global sharing of practices that prove effective means we all benefit from the research going on across the world.
there's no doubt that sharing practices which bring benefits is extremely good value. And I think we should be doing all we can, not only just to complete our research, but communicate our research and make it available globally so that other people can adopt it and take up what we know. At the same time, we need to keep alert to find out new practices that are being created in other countries that we can adopt here to improve our systems.
Farming smarter and applying science on the farm has driven up production at Waitatapia Station, a 2,000-hectare operation run by fifth-generation farming brothers Roger and Hugh Dalrymple in the Manawatu. With a mix of cropping, livestock, forestry and wetlands, they are taking a science-led approach to maximise their outputs while minimising inputs.
You make far greater progress when you understand what the problem is, and it's been happening on your farm. What we've learnt to do, Hugh and I, on this farm is we've actually learnt to work with our soils and our environment and the resources we have available. And I think we have probably quadrupled the production off this farm compared to what we had when we were just sort of doing what we were doing because the grandfather did it. There's still plenty of room for production improvement on this farm. Off the top of my head, I think we're about 8 kilos of greenhouse gases in New Zealand for a kilo of meat produced. So that makes us highly efficient. And what's helped with those gains? First of all, we've increased our lambing percentage. We used to be back around 100% 30 years ago. We're up to 130% lambing now. As far as lamb finishing goes, because we specialise in lamb finishing on this farm, the average growth rate for a lamb in New Zealand is around about 130, 150 grams. And on this farm, we're growing them at around about 300 grams per day. And that's through providing high quality food. So when we're feeding an animal, we try and feed a really balanced diet that suits their rumen and captures that maximum growth we do.
As far as farm evolving and adapting to change and understanding what might be needed in the future, we've got involved in a lot of on-farm research where we basically, I suppose, open ourselves up to private companies, universities, and to our industry good bodies, you know, the likes of Foundation for Arable Research, Beef and Lamb, and even Dairy NZ. When we were in a dairy farm, they would come and do research work on the properties.
One of those scientists is Dave Horn, soil and water scientist at Massey University. He's investigating a potential technique to reduce nitrogen farm runoff making its way into New Zealand's precious coastal lakes.
So drainage is really important, nitrogen's really important. They need both these components to produce this food, but unfortunately when you put them together, then it's likely that you're going to have a marked impact on the environment. And so what we're trying to do is mitigate or minimise the losses of nitrogen.
Controlled drainage is showing promising results.
So if you have more drainage, then you're going to, all other things being equal, lose more nitrogen. So that's the first thing we're trying to minimise, is the amount of water leaving the profile. So we still need the drainage system, but we're going to control when the farmer drains it. So if he's going to do something in the field, plant the maize crop, graze the animals, harvest the vegetables, then we will lower the water table, okay, so we will allow drainage to occur. But if there's no real need for drainage, okay, so maybe there's not a lot happening in the paddock, it's not being grazed or something, there's no field work planned, then we will control the drainage and we will let the water table rise up into the soil profile. The other way controlled drainage works is that if we can keep that water in the soil profile, then it's more likely that that nitrate will be denitrified, that is, converted from potentially polluting nitrate anion, which is what leaches in the soil's drainage water, it'll be given off or released to the air as benign or relatively harmless nitrogen gas. And so that'll lower our concentration, so that when we do have drainage, we'll have less nitrate in that drainage water, and so less nitrogen leaving this farm system, and smaller impact of this farm on the receiving environment, and cleaner or healthier, better water.
Sometimes it's focusing on the simple things that give you the greatest return. Eric Watson is running a 490-hectare fully arable farm near Ashburton, South Canterbury. He's also the current Guinness World Record holder for wheat yield per hectare. For Eric, increasing production while being more sustainable is all about getting the basics right.
Some of the key inputs that have perhaps made the property a big success is the technology we've developed over the years, or just the practices that we've been able to use. Like, we've tried to cut our cultivation back substantially. We've got more precision, and we've got a lot of satellite imagery that we can use today, and that's helping with crop management. I'm fortunate enough, I sit on my sprayer a lot and do my own crop spraying, so I can see what's going on. I think that's been a big benefit, because if you're over a crop every 10 days spraying, or you might be over twice a week in some instances if you're putting fertiliser on, you can see what's helping. I think that all plays a big part. And just attention to detail, I think, over the years, you try and become more attentive to what the crop needs. You learn more all the time. Experience also helps. All this like soil moisture monitoring helps with irrigation, fertiliser, soil testing is helping with our fertiliser inputs. The whole thing has just created more success and more high levels of production. I do focus very much on protecting my soil. We've run tracks on our tractor for many, many years now, probably 20 years. We're getting less compaction with those tracks, and that's one reason for running those tracks. We're getting less wheel slip, or virtually no wheel slip. And to me, wheel slip's quite damaging to soil structure, because you can get what they call smearing. I think that's going to be a very important part of the operation in future years. We've just got to keep continually looking at ways to use less inputs and achieve the same yield.
It can be hard to adjust what you can't measure. Having a clear understanding of key areas of his dairying operation has provided John Stevenson with benchmarks for continually improving his efficiencies and his bottom line.
So for us, the most important things on farm in terms of efficiency and what we're monitoring are our cows, our grass and our soils. So in terms of our cows, we measure the milk volume that they're producing every milking, so twice a day, and their weight, so we have a really good idea of what are the most efficient cows, but also what animals are the healthiest, because that has a significant impact on their greenhouse gas emissions. In terms of our pastures, what we're measuring there is we measure the entire farm, so every paddock. We've got 150 paddocks here that we measure on at least a weekly basis, so how much pasture has been grown, what's available for us to feed our cows, and what's, I suppose, is most efficient in terms of the pasture state and the pasture energy. In terms of our soils, we're annually measuring right across our farm, across different soil types, what the requirements are in terms of what fertiliser we may need to put on an annual basis. Our overall goal, and it makes sense from both an environmental, a greenhouse gas perspective, and also a financial perspective, is to put on as little as we can to enable us to grow the most grass that we can. The improvements that we've made on farm have absolutely delivered to our bottom line. We find that our cows are more efficient. We find that we're producing more milk, and that we're able to breed better animals, which have both short and long-term impacts. We find that we're growing more pasture of a higher quality. We find that our soils are delivering for us, and we're continuing to be able to drive down our environmental and our greenhouse gas emissions because of that. And ultimately that all comes together, and it means that we're able to deliver for our entire business a better bottom line, which will enable us to invest further in terms of some of the aspirations we have around the environment and our greenhouse gas effect on farm here.
For Colin Hurst's arable operation, a significant weather event led to innovative solutions.
Back in the late 90s, we were growing mainly spring crops, and the problem with that is we had a really wet winter, which we too tend to happen with variable climate. We have these extreme events, and therefore get a really wet winter, and we couldn't get our crops in because it was so wet. So what we've done, we've moved to growing more autumn crops, so we can get them established before the winter. Then if we get all the heavy rain through the winter, it means the crop's all set up, ready to go. We don't have to replant. So that's one of the things we've worked out on our farm, is to maximise the opportunity of moisture through the winter, and then we're not having to sow crops in the spring. So, and therefore we can potentially get away with without irrigation.
Colin's seen even more potential for his farm, turning what was once considered a weed into a valuable, environmentally friendly crop.
It's absolutely crucial that science is involved. The scientists will give us farmers the ideas and the direction to head, and then it's up to us farmers to pick up on those types of mitigations that the scientists can come up with. We're really adaptive and looking for the opportunities to undertake our climate change mitigation. We're really receptive to what may be possible in the future. There's new breeding possibilities. There's with animals. There's new plant species coming along that produce less methane. Plantain is an example. Plantain locks up the nitrogen in the soil, so it prevents the nitrogen being leached down through the profile. So it's quite an amazing story, the plantain. It's been around growing in New Zealand since probably the late 90s, and it's only in recent years we've just discovered that it can lock up the nitrogen within the soil and reduce the impact on the environment.
Dr. Robin Dines from Ag Research, one of New Zealand's Crown Research Institutes, is one of the scientists leading the research into plantain.
So one research example that's great, given I'm standing in a paddock of plantain, is the Forages for Reduced Nitrate Leaching project. So it involved the dairy sector, the arable sector and the sheep and beef sector. So part of it was looking at what forages could be beneficial for animals, and out of that came the plantain work. The second part was about rotations, the role of fodder beet and rotations in arable systems. The third part was working with farmers. So at the start of the program, we recruited farmers who were recognised leaders in their area and in their sector, and we worked with them. So the idea was that those farmers would pick up the science as it came through, and we together would work out how to put it into their systems. The farmers have tried to start building the understanding, and that's ongoing, of how plantain fits in a dairy system. Where does it fit in a sheep and beef system? And what are the opportunities as a seed crop for the arable system? So working with the farmers ensured what we developed was practical and adoptable. And we had some people on the ground who believed in what we were doing and could lead the way amongst the other farmers.
What they've found is that plantain has the potential to reduce nitrate leaching and lower nitrous oxide, one of the greenhouse gases.
So plantain is a really interesting species. It's an interesting species because to some extent you might say it's a model of the potential of where we need to go. So plantain has this potential environmental benefit, and there are 4 drivers to how plantain work. Effectively, at the end of the day, we see a lower environmental footprint because we see lower nitrate leaching and possibly lower nitrous oxide, which is one of the greenhouse gases, from when plantain is grown and fed to animals. And there are different mechanisms that are driving that, including it's a diuretic, so the animals urinate more often with a lower concentration of nitrogen in their urine.
Implementing new techniques at an individual farm level has its challenges.
Every farm in New Zealand is unique, so we have about 25,000 unique farms. Now they're unique to the farmer who is making the decision. They are also their own unique combination of soils, rainfall, topography, altitude, frost days, etc. When we see these farms, what we understand is our farmers can run very complex businesses, but it's not simple, and they are businesses at the end of the day.
But the benefits of scientists and farmers working closely together on research far outweigh any challenges.
The farmers become part of the research team. So we're a research team together, and the way we're now doing our science is to work with the farmers and say, in this greater picture, what are the questions that really matter? As a scientist, I've got this question over here. However, if the farmer's question's over here, we won't get any impact from our science. So we're now saying together, let's agree on the question and let's start to explore what the solution might look like.
There are some farmers who are very encouraging in terms of wanting to adopt findings from research, and they're very willing to take the latest technological methods and methodologies and try those as well. We can see that in some farms where there are enormous benefits associated with it. And I think research has a very important value to ensure that we provide that opportunity and we provide the evidence so that they can actually go ahead with that. If every farmer were to practice best practice management systems, we could gain a lot already without the need for any new innovative methods. But the addition of these new methods on top of that could really take us that level upwards which we need to reach.
New Zealand farming is a combination of high-tech and highly practical expertise. Scientists and farmers are working together, often on farm, to find innovative solutions to environmental challenges. How could innovation help you overcome your climate challenges? Join the discussion.